You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The splintering impact from downstairs shattered the evening's fragile calm. This babysitting job I instantly grasped had veered wildly off course. The Sterlings, purveyors of such effortless suburban grace when they'd hired me, now seemed specters behind the terrifying reality unfolding as I crouched in suffocating darkness, shielding their two small trembling children. It had promised simplicity itself. Newcomers to the winding lanes of this neighborhood, the Sterlings needed someone for their children while they attended a corporate function. College funds beckoned, so I'd readily agreed. An impeccable facade they presented. Mr. Sterling, perpetually encased in immaculate tailoring, a titan of commerce. Mrs. Sterling, radiating the serene poise of yoga studios and philanthropic luncheons. And the children, Clara and Leo, sweet-faced, though tinged with an unusual reserve. 7 o'clock saw my arrival. The familiar exchange of bedtime protocols and emergency contacts. A subtle tremor lingered beneath Mrs. Sterling's polish. A faint dissonance I dismissed as first-time maternal anxiety about leaving her offspring with a stranger. Under no circumstances open the door or touch the phone, Mr. Sterling instructed as they departed. His gaze unexpectedly sharp, piercing, an odd intensity, but I merely nodded, murmuring assurances of a smooth night. And for hours it was. Board games unfolded across the carpet with Clara and Leo, followed by pasta and the rituals of pajamas and tucked-in covers. 9 o'clock had just chimed its quiet passage. I was sinking into the sofa's embrace, the television murmuring softly, when the first sound struck. That violent downstairs percussion, then the unmistakable tinkle and shatter of glass. My pulse became a frantic drum against my ribs. An intrusion? Police? Before coherent thought could fully form, heavy treads pounded on the staircase. Instinct propelled me towards the children's rooms. Clara, already awake, stared with eyes like dark pools of fright. "What was that noise?" she breathed, a mere wisp of sound. I don't know, Poppet," I whispered back, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "We must be utterly silent now. Can you promise me that?" She nodded, her small fingers strangling the plush unicorn. Lifting her slight weight, I hastened to Leo's room. He slept, blessedly oblivious, a state I momentarily coveted. But stillness was a luxury we couldn't afford. I roused him with a gentle shake, a finger pressed firmly to my lips. He blinked, bewildered but blessedly quiet. A good boy. The footfalls ascended, closer now. Heart hammering like a trapped bird, I guided them into the cavernous walk-in closet within the master suite. What nightmare had descended? Who stalked these halls? We huddled, 3 breaths mingling shallowly in the pitch-black space. My own heartbeat a deafening metronome. Through a sliver of light at the door's edge, I glimpsed a fleeting shadow. I held my breath until my lungs burned. "Ready or not, here I come," a rasping voice echoed, utterly alien. Not Mr. Sterling, not his wife. This was a stranger, laced with menace. Clara let out a tiny whimper. I drew her tighter, praying silently for her silence. Beside me, Leo quaked, his gaze fixed and wide. He was in the bedroom now. Drawers scraped open, accompanied by guttural muttering. "Where is it? Damn it, they swore it would be here." My thoughts spun wildly. Who was this man? What object held such desperate importance? And why seek it in the Sterling's home? Then, piercing the tension, a mobile phone's shrill ring. The intruder cursed, then answered, "Yeah? No, nothing. Place is clean." "What?" "Check the kids' rooms." "Why?" "Supposed to be empty tonight." Ice flooded my veins. He knew about the children's rooms and the assumption of an empty house. The call terminated abruptly. His heavy steps pivoted, moving directly towards our hiding place. I clamped my arms around Clara and Leo, bracing for discovery. This was it. But salvation arrived not as silence, but as sound. Sirens, wailing in the distance, rapidly escalating. A furious oath erupted from the intruder. I heard him bolt from the room, his footsteps thundering back down the stairs. I remained frozen, mentally ticking off 60 seconds before daring even a tremor. "Wait here," I whispered to the children, my voice thin. "Let me see if it's safe." Edging from the closet's sanctuary, I crept to the window. Flashing red and blue strobed across the manicured lawns and silent houses as police cruisers converged. The front door gaped open, stark against the night, but the intruder had vanished. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, reached for the bedside phone, dialing 911. "A break-in," I managed, the words catching in my throat. "I'm the sitter. 2 children are with me. Upstairs. The man. I think he's gone, but I don't know." The dispatcher's calm voice assured me officers were already sweeping the house. Someone would send momentarily. And true to her word, a uniformed officer materialized in the doorway, weapon lowered but ready. "It's all right," he said, his voice a low anchor. "You're safe. Come out slowly now." I called the children forth, and we were guided downstairs. The living room presented a scene of chaos. Furniture upended, framed memories dashed from the walls. Yet the wreckage barely registered. Relief washed over me, potent and absolute. While one officer gently took my statement, another approached, his expression somber. "We have some questions about the Sterlings," he began. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. "What about them? Did something happen?" He let out a slow breath. "Ma'am, the people you know as the Sterlings, that's not who they are. Their real names are Finch and Nora Vance. They're fugitives, wanted across 3 states for massive embezzlement and fraud." The world tilted violently. I collapsed onto the edge of the sofa, the information refusing to compute. But the children, The children are unharmed, he affirmed quickly. But I'm afraid they don't belong to the Vances. They were abducted 6 months ago. Their real parents are in Ohio. My head swam. The perfect family, meticulously constructed, dissolved into a monstrous lie. And those poor, innocent children. Through the ensuing hours, the fractured narrative pieced itself together. The Vances, nay Sterlings, were seasoned grifters, masters of a complex financial deception, leaving ruined lives and stolen millions in their wake, always staying just beyond the law's reach. The children were props, integral to their charade of respectable domesticity. The intruder, likely an associate or victim of their scams, hunting for incriminating evidence or hidden loot, never anticipating occupants. Hence the Vance's stark warnings about the door, the phone. They suspected retribution might come knocking. As for Clara and Leo, Sophie and Ben, their true names, their reunion with their actual parents the following day was a torrent of tears and joyous relief I will carry with me forever. In the aftermath, whispers painted me a hero for shielding the children. Heroism felt hollow. Naivete and foolishness resonated more strongly. How had I missed the cracks in their polished veneer? My heart ached for Sophie and Ben. Their small worlds violently upended not once, but twice. That night irrevocably altered my perception. Caution became my watchword. Observation my shield. I learned the treacherous artifice of appearances. How predators often wear the most convincing masks of normalcy. Yet, I also discovered a reservoir of strength within myself. When terror reigned, I hadn't fractured. I had acted, protected. I faced down the darkness and emerged, shaken but whole. Years have passed. Sometimes the memory surfaces, sharp and sudden. I wonder about Sophie and Ben. Hope in life granted them peace and happiness with their true family. I picture the Vances confined by federal prison walls and question if remorse ever pierced their calculated deceit. Mostly, I reflect on the startling velocity with which the ordinary can combust into the extraordinary, the hidden currents swirling beneath placid surfaces. I still occasionally watch over children, but now instinct is my truest guide. A flicker of unease, a discordant note. I heed them because the starkest lesson learned wasn't about the stranger forcing entry, but about the insidious danger posed by those who welcomed me inside. Bravery, I found, isn't the absence of fear, but the resolute choice to act despite it. It's sheltering the vulnerable. And sometimes, it's about confronting the abyss and finding yourself stronger on the far side. The naive girl who walked into the Sterling house that evening is gone, replaced by someone wiser, more vigilant, more prepared. And that transformation, born of terror, remains a profound, if harrowing, inheritance. The carriage gave a violent shudder, a mechanical spasm, and across the aisle, 3 heads pivoted backward, snapping into alignment with unnerving precision. That was the fracture point, the moment the mundane tapestry of the 11:45 p.m. Northeast Corridor run from Boston tore open. Hundreds of journeys Elias had made on the steel serpent bound for New York, cocooned in the familiar fugue of late-night travel. Yet never had he witnessed such aberrant choreography. He occupied his customary seat, third row from the carriage's terminus, observing them through the gritty lens of exhaustion after a day steeped in negotiations. Above, fluorescent tubes sputtered, painting their faces in unreliable strokes of light and shadow. They clustered near the carriage's far end, statuesque in dark business attire, their stillness broken only by those jarring synchronized reactions to the train's lurches. Digits glowed on Elias's phone. 1:17 a.m. The carriage breathed emptiness, save for himself, the trio, and a pair of slumbering forms huddled midway down. Providence had dissolved into the darkness behind them, leaving only the hypnotic cadence of wheels drumming steel, a lonely rhythm in the enveloping quiet. He attempted to anchor his focus to the laptop's glow, but his gaze kept snagging on them. Two men, one woman, their posture defied natural ease, spines rigidly perpendicular, shoulders squared at identical, unnatural angles. When the train swayed, a subtle tilt rippling through the car, they swayed with it. A single, indivisible entity tethered by unseen filaments. A clammy chill seeped into his palms, resting on the keyboard. Paranoia, he chided himself, a phantom conjured by weariness. Attend to your own sphere. Yet the thought dissolved as one figure executed a turn of the head, a sharp, ratcheting motion devoid of fluidity, and fixed its gaze directly upon him. The face, it was a meticulous counterfeit. Humanoid, yes, but the eyes voided the illusion entirely. Glassy orbits like polished obsidian marbles, utterly devoid of the micro-movements of life, unblinking. The surrounding skin possessed a smoothness that bordered on the synthetic, flawless, to the point of revulsion. Elias wrenched his gaze down, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Perspiration prickled his brow, a cold counterpoint to the carriage's artificial chill. A desperate urge to flee, to find sanctuary in another car, warred with a leaden inertia pinning him to his seat. The train's velocity began to bleed away, signaling an approaching station. Footsteps echoed down the aisle, deliberate, measured. Elias kept his eyes locked on the meaningless text on his screen, refusing to look up. Then a hand clamped onto his shoulder, fingers digging with surprising force. No sudden moves. Keep your eyes averted from them. When this train halts, you exit with me. The voice was a low growl, freighted with urgency. Turning his head by slow degrees, Elias saw a man, perhaps in his late 50s, close-cropped silver hair framing a face etched with experience, clad in a scuffed leather jacket. The grip didn't lessen. "Who?" Elias began, a mere whisper. The man cut him off sharply. "Their movements are discordant because their nature is discordant. You perceived it, didn't you? The synchronicity remain aboard this train, and New York becomes an unreachable destination." Decoloration intensified. Through the grime-streaked window, the nascent lights of Kingston Station swam into view. Elias's mind fractured into 1,000 racing possibilities. This stranger, a potential threat himself? Yet the timbre of his voice, a raw alloy of fear and unshakable conviction, resonated with unsettling authority. Elias risked a glance towards the trio. They were erect now, converging on the aisle with that same terrifying, unified grace. Their motion was liquid, yet fundamentally wrong, like observing a film reel projected at a subtly distorted frame rate. "Now!" the stranger hissed, hauling Elias bodily from his seat. He snatched his laptop bag, abandoning his suitcase to the overhead rack. As they plunged towards the exit, Elias heard the distinct sound of pursuit. 3 pairs of feet striking the floor in perfect, resonant unison. They were gaining, their pace accelerating, yet maintaining that flawless synchrony. Before the train had fully surrendered its momentum, the stranger wrenched the emergency door release. A blast of frigid air assaulted them as he propelled Elias toward the gap. "Jump!" Thought evaporated, replaced by raw instinct. His feet met gravel, the impact jarring him, sending him tumbling across the rough embankment. The stranger landed beside him an instant later, yanking him upright with rough efficiency. "Run!" They sprinted, scrambling away from the rails, toward the skeletal structure of the deserted station platform. Behind them, a single, heavy thud echoed, the sound of 3 pairs of feet hitting the earth simultaneously. It was too dense, too resonant, like forged metal striking bedrock. "Don't turn around," the stranger gasped between labored breaths. "Whatever happens, don't look at their faces now." Lungs burning, they traversed the vacant platform, bursting into the station building itself. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with an intrusive loudness in the profound silence. A station agent, looking drowsy and lost in his phone's glow, glanced up incuriously as they stormed in. "Secure the entrances," the stranger commanded. "Contact the authorities." The agent merely blinked, confusion clouding his features. Elias turned, compelled to look back through the glass doors, and froze. They were advancing towards the station, maintaining their perfect, gliding formation. Their faces, bile surged in Elias's throat. The skin had undergone a metamorphosis, assuming a translucent, waxy quality. Their eyes captured the station lights, reflecting them like polished chrome spheres. The stranger pulled him down behind a bank of unforgiving plastic seats. "Stay low," he ordered, extracting a small metallic cylinder etched with unfamiliar symbols from his jacket pocket. The glass door slid open with a pneumatic sigh. 3 pairs of footsteps entered, their cadence precise, synchronized. The sound ricocheted off the tiled floor. Click, click, click. "What are they?" Elias whispered, the question ripped from his throat. "Later," Galen replied curtly, "contingent upon survival." The footsteps drew nearer. A faint, high-frequency whirring became audible, the sound of intricate machinery spooling up. The station agent, Mr. Abernathy, had finally registered the anomaly. He rose, mouth agape, poised to speak. "Down!" Galen roared at him. Abernathy's reaction was fatally slow. One of the figures gestured toward him, its arms suddenly elongating, fingers unfurling into metallic, tentacle-like appendages. Abernathy emitted a choked scream as the tendrils coiled around his throat. Galen sprang up, aiming the metal cylinder. An intensely high-pitched tone saturated the air. The 3 figures froze mid-motion, heads swiveling toward Galen and Elias with that sickening clockwork precision. "Cover your ears!" Galen bellowed. He manipulated a dial on the cylinder, and the tone escalated, becoming physically painful. A vibration that seemed to resonate within Elias's very bones. The three figures began to shudder violently. Their synthetic skin rippled like disturbed water, then tore, sloughing away. Beneath lay a reality that clawed at sanity. A grotesque amalgamation of gleaming metal, sparking wires, and elements that mimicked the organic, yet pulsed with an alien wrongness, all writhing and reconfiguring. Abernathy had crumpled to the floor, scrabbling backward as the creature relinquished its grip. The three figures, entities, abominations, began to disintegrate. Shards of their false flesh peeled off, exposing more of the intricate horror beneath. Galen held the cylinder steady, his hand unwavering despite the fine tremors Elias could see coursing through his arm. The pitch shifted again, and the creature's movements devolved into spastic jerks. Their coordination shattered. They lurched toward Galen and Elias, stumbling. One entity's mouth gaped open, revealing not teeth, but concentric rows of metallic points extending outward like a horrific drill bit. A sound erupted, neither human nor mechanical. A screech that vibrated Elias's teeth and blurred his vision. The overhead fluorescence exploded in a shower of glass. In the ensuing dimness, punctuated by emergency lights, Elias saw arcs of blue electricity crackle across the creature's exposed inner workings. They were failing, collapsing, components clattering onto the tiled floor. "Stay behind me," Galen instructed, advancing cautiously. He kicked aside a fallen piece. A hand, its metallic fingers still twitching, grasping futilely at his boot. The creatures made one final, synchronized contortion, their heads snapping back at an anatomically impossible angle. Then they collapsed entirely, a wreckage of parts strewn across the station floor. The debilitating sound from the cylinder ceased, plunging the station into a ringing silence. Mr. Abernathy huddled in a corner, emitting low, whimpering sounds. The emergency lighting cast long, dancing shadows over the scene of carnage. "What?" Elias croaked, his throat raw. What were those things? Galen was already in motion, retrieving another device from his jacket. Small, black, resembling a remote control. He aimed it at the scattered debris, which began to smoke, then liquefy into viscous dark puddles. "Hunters," he stated finally, his gaze fixed on the dissolving remains. "Manifesting on transit systems, anywhere they can infiltrate, isolate targets. Initial mimicry is human, but the kinetics betray them. The slight aberrations in movement, that's the tell." "Hunting what?" Elias asked, though a chilling certainty already resided within him. "Us, humanity." Galen turned, his expression stark. "They acquire specimens, dissect them, refine their imitation protocols. The units encountered tonight were an older iteration. Newer models possess far greater verisimilitude." Mr. Abernathy, having retrieved his phone, was now frantically attempting to dial. Galen approached him, briefly flashing some form of identification Elias couldn't clearly discern. "Federal oversight," he announced smoothly. "Tonight's incident is classified. A containment unit is en route for sanitation and debriefing. Until their arrival, this station remains quarantined." Abernathy nodded mutely, lowering his phone. Galen returned to Elias. "The immediate threat is neutralized, but you'll accompany me. There are crucial details you require." and we must ascertain if they implanted a tracking marker. Elias surveyed the scene, the rapidly dissolving pools on the floor, the shattered glass, the scorch marks marring the walls. His entire perception of reality had irrevocably shifted within a quarter hour. "Why intervene for me?" he asked. "Because you register the discrepancy. Most disregard the signs, rationalize the incongruity, but you saw. That designates you as either potential prey or a potential asset." He moved toward the station exit. "Are you coming?" Elias glanced back through the glass doors toward the tracks. Far in the distance, the train's taillights dwindled, swallowed by the night. Had he remained aboard? "Yes," Elias affirmed, falling into step behind him. "I'm coming." Outside, the night air felt crisp, untainted. A canopy of stars glittered indifferently above the deserted parking lot. Kalen led him to an unmarked black SUV. "There's a secure location approximately an hour from here," he said, unlocking the vehicle. "I'll provide context en route, but first, pinpoint accuracy. When precisely did you first recognize their abnormality?" Elias recalled the instant on the train, the unnatural, unified recoil. "Their heads," he replied. The train jolted, and the heads snapped back in perfect concert, as if programmed. Kalen nodded, turning the ignition. "Good. Acute observation skills. We have need of individuals like you." "Individuals like me? For what purpose?" "For the resistance," Kalen stated plainly. "Because their mimicry improves constantly, and the number of humans capable of discerning them dwindles." As they pulled out of the lot, Elias saw flashing lights converging in the distance. Dark vehicles bearing official insignia. The sanitation team arriving to obliterate any trace of the night's events. 1,000 questions clamored within him, but for the moment, silence felt appropriate. He watched the dark ribbon of road unfurl before them. His existence had been fundamentally altered in that train carriage. The instant he noticed 3 figures moving incorrectly. Now that filter couldn't be removed. He found himself scrutinizing the subtle mechanics of movement in remembered faces, searching for the telltale signs separating the authentic from the imitation. Kalen, whose name Elias still didn't possess, drove with steady competence, his eyes periodically flicking to the rearview mirror, vigilant. Elias knew terror should be his primary state, that he should be demanding explanations or release. Yet strangely, this felt congruent, as if he'd merely awakened into the world as it truly was. "Acquire some rest," Kalen advised. "Tomorrow, your indoctrination commences. You must learn identification protocols, defensive measures, and paramountly survival tactics." Elias leaned back against the seat but kept his eyes open, scanning the dark landscapes rushing past, empty roads, indistinct buildings. How many other facades concealed an unsettling truth? The world appeared unchanged, yet his perception was forever altered. Now he understood. Sometimes when movement feels discordant, when something seems fractionally off, it isn't imagination's trickery. Sometimes the alien walks among us, their camouflage simply more sophisticated than we ever conceived. The SUV devoured the miles, carrying them further from the station, deeper into a clandestine reality. Behind them, the night train relentlessly continued its journey toward New York. And Elias wondered how many other passengers might perceive a flicker of wrongness in the dark. and if any would be fortunate enough to find a hand pulling them towards safety before the imitation became indistinguishable from the real. The memory clings, sharp as frost on glass. The first night that sound began. I was Leo, adrift in my second-floor room within the tall shared townhouse, laptop glow painting my face. 3 others inhabited this space with me, Sam, Maya, Ben, each claiming a room, converging only in the communal kitchen or the sprawling living area below. That initial instance, a series of soft, hesitant taps, I dismissed readily. Old house settling, pipes groaning their nocturnal complaints, the city breathing outside the thin panes. I clicked the laptop shut, stretched beneath the weight of a yawn, and courted sleep. But the knocking lingered, a faint, steady rhythm against the grain of silence, seeding a nascent unease. Morning light found me scrutinizing the closet. A built-in relic, its thick wooden doors exhaled a scent of dust and time. No apertures marred its surface, no telltale signs of rodent or insect intrusion. I ran my hands along its flanks, rapped the wood sharply, testing, but only silence answered. Inside, mundane artifacts. A small box holding essential papers rested on the shelf. A pair of forgotten suitcases slumped on the floor. Nothing amiss. Shrugging off the night's faint disturbance, I gathered close and descended into the day's routine, leaving the house behind for the predictable rhythms of work. For a time, the noise remained a peripheral whisper. Late at night, submerged in the pre-sleep quiet, a delicate tapping might surface, seemingly from within that closet's depths. The plumbing I reasoned, woven into the very fabric of the aging structure. This house had its quirks, stairs that protested underfoot on specific treads, floorboards that moaned when the wind pressed against the walls. Worry felt like an overreaction. Downstairs, life hummed along. Shared beers, pizza, sprawled across the coffee table, the flickering television screen. Once, Sam inquired offhandedly about strange night sounds, but I deflected, murmuring about the usual creaks and groans of an old dwelling. Weeks bled into one another, and the sound shed its subtlety. It grew bolder, harder to relegate to mere structural size. There were nights I'd hover on the edge of sleep, only to be jolted by 3, 4 quick raps, distinct, insistent, like knuckles lightly drumming on wood. My breath would catch. I'd listen, suspended in the sudden quiet that followed. Then the slow release as my pulse subsided, the familiar internal mantra, just the house settling. One pre-dawn hour, around 3, consciousness surfaced abruptly, unbidden. My room lay steeped in silence, save for the whirring fan blades slicing the air. Then, a dull thump resonated from the closet. Heavier this time, less tap, more impact. I froze, eyes locked onto the unmoving closet door, a rigid tension seizing my spine. The handle remained still. Something fell, I rationalized. Something shifted on the shelf. Yet the following morning's inspection revealed perfect order. Nothing disturbed, nothing displaced. The inevitable currents of life began pulling my housemates away. Maya and Ben spoke of a smaller apartment, a cozier arrangement. Sam fielded a job offer in a distant city. Our disparate schedules stretched the townhouse's seams, making it feel cavernous, underused. The landlord offered a favorable continuation of my lease, and I opted to stay. Proximity to work, the allure of solitude, it seemed a welcome shift. This was before the knocking truly found its voice. After their departure, the nights acquired a profound stillness, amplifying loneliness. Downstairs, the television offered flickering companionship, but shadows seemed to deepen in the corners, urging constant vigilance. The living room swam in the dim pool cast by a solitary floor lamp. The kitchen light stayed off, an offering to economy. Ascending the stairs became a ritual, flicking on the hall light before venturing into the creaking passage, each step echoing in the house's vast emptiness. The closet's faint percussion continued sporadically, a familiar yet unsettling undercurrent. Then came a night, perhaps a week into my solitary tenure, wrestled from sleep by a bout of insomnia. Work anxieties and personal threads tangled in my mind. I lay staring at the ceiling, the fan a monotonous comfort against the thick summer air. No air conditioning offered respite, only an open window and the small fan's tireless effort. Around 2, it began, a soft tapping from the closet. Slow, measured, as if seeking attention gently. Adrenaline surged, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. My throat suddenly parched. I fought the urge to ignore it, but the taps grew more deliberate, less random. I sat up, the sheets clinging damply to my skin. Light felt like a surrender. Instead, propelled by a mix of fear and resolve, I padded silently toward the closet, the floorboards emitting soft complaints beneath my weight. Pressing my ear to the cool wood, I held my breath. Faintly, unmistakably, the tapping sounded directly on the other side. Knuckles on timber, yet unnervingly delicate. My hand closed around the doorknob, a tremor running through my fingers. Slowly, I turned it. The door groaned open on protesting hinges. In that instant, a distinct chill, like a breath from a refrigerated room, brushed against my face. Impossible! No AC existed in this house. The sensation made me recoil. My gaze swept the interior darkness. Fumbling for my phone, I activated its flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. Shelves, suitcases, shadows. Nothing stirred. I waved a hand inside, searching for the source of the draft, but the cold spot was ephemeral, dissolving back into the room's muggy warmth within seconds. Retreating, I pulled the door shut, sinking onto the edge of my bed, heart hammering against my ribs. Rubbing my hands on my knees, I sought equilibrium. The rest of the night passed in vigil, watching that inert door until the 6:00 a.m. alarm shattered the tense silence. I rose, showered, attempted to wash away the night's strangeness with the soap and water. The subsequent days unfolded without overt incident, yet residue of disquiet lingered. Entering my room meant an immediate, involuntary glance toward the closet. The memory of that phantom coldness gnawed at me. I re-examined the closet walls, the back panel, the sides. No gaps, no vents, no plausible connection to the outside world. The hallway walls remained solid, impassive. Mentioning it to a colleague yielded only a shrug, a dismissive comment about the eccentricities of old houses and their peculiar drafts. His lack of concern offered little solace. A few nights later, engrossed in a show on my laptop downstairs, the sound returned, drifting from the upper floor. Midnight approached. It wasn't loud, but carried a distinct clarity. Knuckles rapping wood again. 4 or 5 times, a pause, then another sequence. A familiar twist tightened my stomach. Lowering the laptop volume, I listened intently. The knocking persisted. Rising, I left the relative safety of the living room glow and ascended the stairs, each step measured, deliberate. My heart raced. A fine sheen of sweat beaded on my forehead. The hallway light blazed. My bedroom door stood ajar. As I crossed the threshold, the knocking ceased abruptly. The closet door remained shut exactly as I'd left it. I approached, hand hovering over the knob. A moment of internal debate. Open it again? My palms felt slick, my breathing shallow. Turning the knob decisively, I swung the door wide. The familiar musty scent greeted me, but no accompanying chill this time. Just stuffy, tenebrous air. Phone flashlight carving through the dark. I scanned the interior. Shelf, documents shifted aside, peered behind the suitcases. I even tapped the back panel experimentally. All appeared mundane, solid. Listening acutely yielded only silence. Closing the door felt like sealing away an unanswered question. Back downstairs, the show held no appeal. Every creak of the house set my nerves jangling. Over the ensuing fortnight, resigned acceptance warred with persistent unease. The knocks became an unwelcome fixture of my nightly landscape. Sometimes brief, fleeting, other times a sustained, minute-long performance. I'd lie rigid in bed, eyes fixed on the closet, imagination painting lurid scenarios in the dark. Retrieving clothes became a swift, tactical operation. Open, grab, shut. I began migrating belongings to the hallway closet, minimizing interaction with the problematic one. One quiet afternoon, fueled by frustration, I resolved to conduct a thorough purge. Everything came out. Documents piled into a cardboard box on the bed. Suitcases dragged into the room. Their latches clicked open. Empty, save for brittle papers, forgotten receipts. I hauled them out, placing them near the doorway, then turned my attention to the closet's bare interior, tapping methodically along the panels, searching for hollow spaces. Yielded nothing but solid, aged wood. No holes, no nests, no sign of infestation. Armed with a screwdriver, I attempted to pry loose a corner of the back panel, hoping to glimpse whatever lay behind. Rusted nails held fast. The panel resisted, threatening to splinter under force. Reluctantly, I abandoned the effort. It wasn't my property to dismantle. Alone in the quiet house that afternoon, surrounded by the closet's evacuated contents, my nerves felt raw, stretched taut. No sounds manifested then, but the memory of the knocking pulsed beneath the surface calm. That night, around 11, a steady thump, thump, thump emanated from the closet. Louder now, more resonant, like determined knuckles. 3 raps, a pause, 3 more. My pulse leaped. A flush rose in my face. A slight tremble started in my legs. I moved to the door, resting my hand on the knob, feeling the vibrations faintly through the wood. The knocks continued, gentle yet undeniably firm. Sweat traced a path down my back. With a sudden surge of resolve, I yanked the door open. Flashlight beam stabbed into the void. Only empty wooden walls met my gaze. I stepped back but left the door ajar, standing sentinel in the heavy silence that descended. The air remained neutral, neither cold nor warm. Minutes passed, marked only by the loud drumming of my own blood in my ears. After a while, I reached in, tapping tentatively on the inner wall. Silence. I tapped again. Nothing answered. I slept, or tried to, with the closet door gaping open that night. A desperate hope lingered. Perhaps I'd witness movement, catch the source in the act. Lights off, cocooned in my sleeping bag on the floor. The bed frame now gone. I watched the deepened darkness within the closet's maw. Every shadow seemed poised to shift. Every corner held potential menace. Hours crawled by in hyper-vigilant wakefulness before exhaustion finally claimed me. Morning arrived with sunlight slanting across the floor, revealing a silent, empty closet. That final month in the townhouse stretched into an eternity of low-grade tension. Evenings followed a lonely pattern. Return from work, microwave solitude, television's hollow glow, the vast, empty house amplified every incidental sound. A clang from the pipe sent me bolting upright, straining to discern its origin. Sleep became shallow, fitful, often aided by a small bedside lamp, casting protective circles of light. Earplugs were intolerable, severing my connection to the surrounding sounds, however unsettling. The knocks persisted, erratic in volume and frequency. One night, they roused me at 4, banishing sleep entirely. I lay staring at the dim ceiling until dawn painted the windows gray. Near the month's end, the landlord called. Another tenant was eager to move in. He offered an early release from my lease. I accepted without hesitation. Boxes materialized, filled with the detritus of my life there. Friends arrived, their cheerful bustle a stark contrast to the house's oppressive quiet, helping load the small moving truck. On the last night, I lay alone in the stripped bedroom, only a sleeping bag between me and the bare floorboards. The closet stood utterly vacant, documents and suitcases already packed away. A foolish hope flickered. Perhaps emptying it had finally silenced it. But around midnight, soft and clear in the resonant emptiness, a single tap sounded from within. My heart gave a familiar heavy thud. I didn't rise. I didn't open the door. I simply stared at it for a long, weary time. The next morning, keys left on the kitchen counter marked the end. One final ascent, one last look into the vacant bedroom. The closet door was closed. Silence reigned. A profound unease remained, tangled with an undeniable surge of relief. Locking the front door felt like closing a chapter I was desperate to finish. I drove away, putting distance between myself and that tall, narrow house. My new apartment is smaller, blessedly unremarkable, nestled in a different part of the city. It possesses a simple bedroom, a functional kitchen, and crucially, no deep built-in closets whispering secrets in the dark. The knocking hasn't followed me here, yet sometimes, in the quiet solitude of late nights, the memory surfaces, the rhythmic tapping, the phantom chill, the visceral clench of fear felt standing before that wooden door. No explanation ever presented itself. There's only the remembered sound, the remembered feeling. I'm profoundly glad to be gone. That is the sum of it. It was a disquieting interlude, one I have no desire to revisit, not even in thought. A peculiar gravity always drew me towards structures surrendered to time. Those hollow shells standing sentinel against oblivion, they beckoned, whispering secrets only decay could tell. I'd breached lesser ruins with companions, sharing the thrill, but this time, solitude called. The target, a colossal warehouse squatting on the city's frayed edge. A brick and rust behemoth we'd skirted countless times, yet never dared penetrate. Its vacancy seemed absolute, a decades-long slumber, etched in its shattered panes and graffiti-scarred hide. Precisely the kind of forgotten space that ignited my marrow. Leaving my car leagues away, or so it felt, I approached on foot. The familiar cocktail of exhilaration and trepidation fizzing in my veins. The warehouse swelled against the bruised twilight, a hulking silhouette breathing faint fumes of petroleum and oxidation, laced with an undercurrent of something older. Damp earth, maybe, or stagnant water. My flashlight carved a trembling cone of light as I navigated toward a splintered door. Warped and agape, seemingly untouched by human hands for an age. To cross that threshold was to plunge into another dimension. The city's murmur vanished, swallowed by a sepulchral hush broken only by the sharp report of my own boots on the concrete floor. Dust motes thick as phantoms danced in the flashlight's beam, disturbed into swirling clouds with every hesitant step. Immensity unfolded within. The interior dwarfed its external promise. Rows of ossified machinery, titans slumbering under shrouds of grime, filled the cavernous space. Along the walls, skeletal pallets lay stacked, draped in cobwebs like macabre finery. I moved with deliberation, a slow pilgrimage through aisles of metal corpses, my light slicing the oppressive dark. The quietude was profound, a heavy blanket that amplified imagined sounds. Infinitesimal creaks, phantom scuttles that arrested my breath and spun me around, flashlight probing the void. Always nothing. Just the echoing emptiness and the long distorted shadows born of my own light. Deeper I ventured, discovering relics, rusted wrenches abandoned mid-task, shards of unidentifiable metal, a congregation of oil drums sealed by decades of neglect. A cautious ease began to settle, curiosity nudging aside the initial fear as I catalogued the detritus of industry. Then, rounding a skeletal pillar of iron, my exploration curdled. He stood mere yards away, sculpted from the gloom, regarding me. Older, weathered, draped in clothes that bore the patina of long neglect, a grizzled beard framing a face carved from stone. No greeting, no movement, just an unnerving fixed stare, eyes like chips of flint catching the light. Homeless perhaps, a squatter seeking refuge. The thought evaporated. No bedding, no meager possessions betrayed habitation. He seemed less an occupant, more an installation, an entity that had simply waited. A reflexive step back, my flashlight beam wavered upward. Apologies, I managed, the word thin in the vastness. Didn't realize anyone was here. Silence answered, thick and viscous. He didn't blink, his expression a mask of impenetrable neutrality. The air grew colder, prickling the nape of my neck. Every instinct screamed, retreat. A primal urge clawing at my throat. Yet my boots felt welded to the dusty concrete. His voice, when it finally surfaced, was a low rasp, like stones grinding together. "This place isn't for you." I swallowed against a sudden drought. Just looking around, I meant no harm. A slow, almost imperceptible shake of his head, his gaze unwavering. "It's dangerous now. Unsafe." A tremor traced my spine. Not the words themselves, but the chilling certainty behind them, an undertone of knowledge I couldn't fathom. It wasn't menace, not quite, but something far more unsettling. A warning from within the abyss. "Right, I'll head out," I offered, striving for a composure I didn't feel. Another backward step. He remained motionless, an impassive statue barring nothing. But as I turned, his voice snagged me, softer still, barely disturbing the dust motes. "They watch." Watch. Who? The question died unspoken. I didn't want the answer. I pivoted and walked, forcing a steady cadence, resisting the urge to flee. Each step echoed unnaturally loud. The moment his unseen presence fell behind me, composure shattered. I ran, feet pounding, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, adrenaline flooding my system. The vast chamber amplified my panicked flight. Bursting through the fractured doorway, I gasped the cool, damp night air, lungs aching. A desperate scan. The doorway remained empty. Just the silent, brooding mass of the warehouse. Back toward the distant safety of my car, I wrestled with reason, attempting to frame the encounter as mere strangeness, a run-in with an eccentric hermit. Yet, as I reached the vehicle, a final glance back froze the blood in my veins. High above, framed in the jagged maw of a second-story window, stood a figure, a silhouette, utterly still, watching. It wasn't the man. This shape was taller, broader, its posture possessing an unsettling rigidity that felt distinctly other. A sentinel of shadow etched against the grimy pane. Cold terror bloomed across my skin as my pulse surged anew. Instinct took over. Ignition engine roar, tires spitting gravel. I fled into the night, refusing the rearview mirror, refusing to confirm if that silent observer tracked my escape. The warehouse receded, but its gaze did not. Days melt into nights, yet the sensation lingers. A persistent, phantom pressure between my shoulder blades. The man's words echo, amplified by the memory of that second silent watcher. Something resides in that decaying shell. Something more than memory and rust. And sometimes, in the deepest hours, I feel those eyes again, patient, waiting for my return. The canopic jar, millennia old, possessed no earthly reason to have translocated itself. Yet, the phosphor glow of the monitor held undeniable, spectral proof, a digital ghost freezing the marrow in my bones. Frame by meticulous frame, the ancient vessel slid, unassisted, a silent transgression against every physical law I held dear. I couldn't fathom then how this flicker of the impossible heralded a descent into nocturnal dread, a night poised to fray the very fabric separating the mundane present from the whispering past. For half a year, the echoing halls of the Metropolitan Museum had been my nocturnal domain. Elias, custodian of slumbering relics and aspiring anthropologist, found a certain solace in the sepulchral quiet, ideal environs for grappling with dense textbooks detailing bygone cultures. The routine was a steady metronome against the vast silence. Patrol, the shadowed galleries where history slept uneasily. Scrutinize the banks of monitors, relaying silent vigils, then surrender to academic pursuits. The primary battle waged merely against encroaching sleep, until this particular rotation, when the predictable stillness fractured. 10 o'clock saw the familiar handover, the day sentinel retreating into the living world as I stepped into the museum's hushed, Cimmerian embrace. My initial circuit commenced under the spectral wash of emergency lights, each artifact casting elongated, skeletal shadows across polished floors. It was a familiar eeriness, a quietude I believed I'd acclimated to. A comfortable haunting, a profoundly foolish assumption. Midnight approached, the profound stillness deepening. My gaze drifted across the monitor array, snagging, then fixating on the feed from the Nile Valley collection. There, bathed in the camera's unwavering electronic stare, the exhibit's undeniable jewel, a funerary urn 4 millennia, removed from its maker's touch, appeared to glide, perhaps a finger's breadth, westward across its velvet pedestal. A trick of fatigued eyes? A phantom reflection? I blinked, scrubbing irritably at my eyelids, then deliberately spooled the digital recording back. The sequence replayed, stark and irrefutable. Frame A, the urn static in its designated coordinates. Frame B, its position subtly, yet undeniably, altered. Utterly impossible, the words escaped my lips. A faint exhalation swallowed instantly by the control room stillness. I knew that display intimately. Its every specific placement. The urn possessed significant heft, ensconced securely within its climate-controlled reinforced vitrine. No tremor, no draft, no conceivable terrestrial force could nudge it thus. It had to be an anomaly, a phantom signal corrupting the wiring, a ghost in the machine. Rationalization clawed desperately for purchase, demanding a physical inspection to debunk this electronic heresy. Yet, venturing towards the Egyptian wing, a palpable wrongness began to permeate the familiar air. It grew thick, heavy, expectant, buzzing with a static charge reminiscent of the moments before lightning splits the heavens. Within the gallery itself, initial appearances offered only calm. The urn rested upon its plinth, seemingly serene, its meticulously carved hieroglyphs absorbing the scant illumination, patterns of life and afterlife etched into permanence. Innocuous, until I drew nearer, close enough to see the fine dust motes dancing in the low light. A jolt, cold and sharp as obsidian, coursed through me. It had moved. The painted Wadjet eye, eternally vigilant, whose unwavering gaze always commanded the center of the room, was now averted, canted fractionally, unnervingly, toward the shadowed western wall. Eyes traced a glacial path along my vertebrae. My careful logic, my insistence on a technical fault, dissolved into the charged silence, leaving only a raw, burgeoning dread. I had been so certain. The precise moment the stain first snagged my attention eludes me, lost perhaps in the thick weave of that night's heat. Air, heavy as wet velvet, clung to my skin. I remember standing adrift in the living room's center, directly beneath that juncture where wall met ceiling. Sleep, a fugitive guest, had abandoned me again to the night's oppressive warmth, leaving a restless energy thrumming beneath my skin. Silence reigned in the apartment, its alabaster walls shimmering faintly under the solitary lamp burning sentinel in the hall. my gaze drifted upward, eyes narrowing. There, nestled in the corner's sharp angle, resided a dark bloom, an anomaly almost swallowed by the convergence. It had no right to be there. These walls were my own recent work, painted mere months ago, intended to be immaculate. Initially, my mind grasped for logic. A whisper of mildew, perhaps, or the telltale signature of a water leak. Rising onto the balls of my feet, neck straining, I scanned the ceiling's texture. Smooth, unblemished. I extinguished the hallway lamp, plunging the room into deeper shadow, testing if light itself was the culprit. But even cloaked in near darkness, the mark persisted, a void detached from any discernible source. Light restored, I willed myself back toward the bedroom, attempting to dismiss it. Yet a subtle dissonance remained, an insistent, subcutaneous itch. This apartment, claimed a year prior after escaping a place that perpetually felt borrowed, was meant to be a canvas for renewal. An old structure, yes, but cared for. This top-floor unit promised elevation, soaring ceilings, generous windows bathing the space in light. I recalled the sheer exhilaration of its openness, a balm after the confinement of my previous studio. Space. I had craved space. Now, supine and wakeful, I felt the phantom presence of the dark smear hovering in the adjacent room. A familiar tightness constricted my chest. Breath came shallowly as I fought to ignore its lurking implication. Morning light offered no absolution. I scrutinized the corner again. No visible change, or none my weary eyes could register. Perhaps exhaustion had played tricks. I tried to rationalize, but unease lingered like a faint, unpleasant scent. Fetching a chair, I positioned it beneath the spot, ascended, and reached out a tentative hand. My fingertips met only the cool, smooth finish of paint. No moisture, no textural deviation, no grime. Yet, stepping back down, the dark shape clung stubbornly, an optical illusion defying explanation. A stain imprinted more on my perception than the plaster. Throughout the ensuing week, I submerged myself in work. The solitary existence of a freelance designer, usually a comfort. The quiet hum of the laptop, the rhythmic dance of midday sun across the floorboards. These were my anchors. Now, however, each time I rose to stretch, my gaze involuntarily sought the ceiling corner. The stain seemed amplified, not drastically, not yet, but undeniably larger. What began as a mere fleck now resembled a dark coin, its edges ragged, indeterminate. Staring intently, I could almost perceive a faint tremor along its boundary, a subtle flexing that warped the clean geometry of the corner. Armed with a step stool and a damp cloth, I attempted erasure. The cloth returned pristine. The mark remained immutable. I stood utterly still, searching for any trick of shadow, any stray beam or reflection. Nothing. It wasn't color, precisely, but absence. A localized eclipse against the white. Sleep became increasingly fractured. Night after night yielded sweat-soaked sheets and a racing heart. Sometimes, faint creaks drifted from overhead, but the building was aged, its bones groaning with the diurnal shifts of temperature and pressure. Yet, an atmosphere had descended, a psychic weight pressing down, thickening the very air I breathed. One afternoon, Compelled by a burgeoning anxiety, I undertook a more thorough exploration, seeking any anomaly that might offer context. The apartment's previous occupant had abandoned several boxes in the meager storage closet, items I'd neglected to discard. Within, amidst yellowed periodicals and brittle newsprint, lay a small, leather-bound notebook. Its pages were mostly filled with dense, unreadable script, but tucked within was a faded monochrome photograph. It depicted a room corner. This room, I felt with a jolt of certainty, though the perspective differed. The walls appeared starker, emptier, and there, in the photograph's upper reaches, faint but unmistakable, was a smudge, blurred by time and focus, yet chillingly familiar. Goose flesh erupted along my arms. Whoever lived here before, they had seen it too. That night, I doused all illumination and stood in the living room's heart, letting my vision adjust to the profound dark. The stain loomed larger than ever, perhaps the breadth of my hand now. Silence pressed in, so absolute I imagined I could hear the frantic pulse in my own ears. Then it happened. The darkness on the ceiling seemed to ripple, not merely a discoloration, but something fluid, tenebrous, alive. My breath hitched. Illusion, I told myself, ocular fatigue. But a suffocating pressure built in my chest, forcing a gasp. I flicked on a nearby lamp. Light flooded the space, pinning the shape, rendering it static once more, inert yet undiminished. My efforts at denial crumbled. Over the next few days, the shadow's expansion accelerated, particularly under the cloak of night. Each morning revealed its insidious progress. Millimeters gained along the ceiling's edge, creeping downward toward the walls. Its periphery frayed into subtle, unsettling forms, like nascent tendrils or delicate filaments tracing the plaster. Not patterned, not quite, yet possessing a sense of deliberate encroachment, slowly claiming dominion over my sanctuary. I considered seeking help, but the absurdity paralyzed me. Who does one summon for a living shadow? A contractor? An exorcist? The landlord remained unreachable, traveling. I reached out to a friend, Leo, but found myself incapable of articulating the truth, mumbling instead about feeling unwell, needing company. He promised to visit the following week. A week felt an eternity away. That evening, I retreated to the bedroom, sealing the door, leaving the hallway light burning as a fragile ward. Drifting through uneasy, shallow sleep, I sensed movement. Heart hammering, I rose, cracked the bedroom door, and peered out. The hallway glowed dimly, silent, yet the walls themselves seemed duller, their color leached, as if the shadow's influence was bleeding outward. A cold sweat slicked my skin. My throat felt like parchment. I fumbled for water in the kitchen, gulping it down. Action was necessary. Confrontation. Resolute, I marched to the corner, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The focused light illuminated only the mundane texture of painted plaster. Yet, standing beneath it, my legs began to tremble. A presence, not auditory, not tactile, but an undeniable presence that coiled tightly in my gut. My heart battered against my ribs. A metallic taste filled my mouth, and the fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. This darkness possessed weight, a palpable density that seeped into the very atmosphere. For days, I waged a futile war, Sheets of white paper, taped defiantly over the corner, were found curled and detached by morning. I contemplated repainting, installing brighter lights, flooding the area with artificial sun, but a deep certainty told me it was pointless. This wasn't about paint or photons. It was older, deeper, something intrinsically tied to this space, feeding on the very sanctuary I desperately defended. My appetite evaporated. Nausea became a constant evening companion. Food tasted like dust. The apartment grew intolerably hot, stifling. Windows thrown wide admitted the city's distant clamor. Traffic, sirens, fleeting comforts against the encroaching silence within. As dusk bled into night, the knowledge of what waited inside settled heavily. Leaving occurred to me, fleeing to some anonymous motel, but finances were precarious, and a stubborn refusal to surrender this hard-won space took root. Alongside it, a morbid curiosity. Understand it, perhaps control it. One night, the tension reached its zenith. The shadow now commanded nearly half the ceiling, its dark pseudopods tracing the room's architecture. In the faint glow spilling from my bedside lamp, I watched it shift, pulse with a slow, terrifying rhythm. As if inhaling the remaining light, my own breathing grew ragged, mirroring its cadence, pulse thundering in my ears. Trembling, yet strangely determined, I stepped into the living room. "What do you want?" The words emerged as a parched whisper into the void. Silence answered, punctuated only by the shadow's relentless expansion. The old photograph surfaced in my memory. I returned to the storage closet, driven by a desperate need for more, for any clue. Shoving aside dusty relics, my fingers brushed against folded paper wedged behind a loose section of baseboard. A receipt, decades old, for minor repairs, scrawled on the reverse in faint, unsteady script. "It grows when you're afraid." Ice traced its way down my spine. The previous tenant knew. This was their buried warning. A surge of impotent fury rose within me. It fed on fear. My fear. Perhaps that was the key. The vulnerability. Starve it. But exhaustion gnawed at me. Terror had woven itself into my very fabric. Holding the flashlight steady felt like an act of monumental will. Facing the corner, arms crossed against a sudden chill, I felt tears prickle. "You won't have me," I muttered, my voice fragile. I extinguished all lights save for one small lamp near the exit, a beacon in the encroaching gloom. Forcing myself to stand directly beneath the umbral mass, dizziness washed over me as my heart threatened to beat its way out of my chest. Slow breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. My stomach roiled. I tilted my head back, compelling myself to truly see it. The darkness above seemed to quiver, a faint shimmer disturbing its edges. My knees threatened to buckle. I leaned heavily against the wall, sweat turning cold against my back. Then, an act of recklessness. I raised a hand, pressing my palm flat against the wall, just beneath the shadow's descending border. I braced for contact, for something to seize my wrist, pull me into the void. Nothing. Only the cool, slightly chalky paint, but a faint creak echoed from the ceiling. A subtle displacement of air, a silent current passing overhead. Nausea surged violently. I stumbled back, hand clamped over my mouth, breath tearing through my lungs. The ceiling was almost entirely consumed now, a vast blot erasing the white. The presence thickened, viscous, like wading through invisible pitch. My lungs strained, every nerve shrieked, Yet I remained rooted, sweat blinding me. My vision swam. A choice loomed: abandon this place now, or escalate. I snatched a nearby broom, jabbing its handle upward. The tip scraped impotently against the dark expanse. The handle, slick with sweat, slipped from my grasp. A curse escaped my lips. The darkness pulsed, and for a fleeting, horrifying instant, I perceived a shape within it. An elongated silhouette, hideously twisted, vaguely human, but fundamentally wrong. That broke me. I bolted, stumbling over the rug, bursting into the relative safety of the hallway. The overhead lights felt searingly bright. I gasped for air, chest heaving, head pounding, pacing the narrow corridor. The urge to simply run, leave everything was overwhelming. Yet, after minutes that stretched into an age, a grim resolve pulled me back. I had to see. Had it followed? Inside, the apartment felt quieter. The lamp by the door flickered, then held steady. I looked up. The darkness remained, immense, but perhaps its advance had stalled? Or was that merely hope deceiving weary eyes? I retreated to bed, leaving the bedroom door ajar, the lamp burning. Sleep eventually claimed me. A fitful surrender plagued by shifting voids and suffocating silence. Morning revealed a ceiling almost entirely stained. The vast majority of the upper surface was now a deep, absorbing black, but something had shifted. It had halted just shy of my bedroom doorway. A hesitant boarder, dragging a hand across my face, feeling the rasp of stubble and the film of sweat. I felt utterly depleted, nerves frayed raw. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection startled me. The skin beneath my eyes seemed bruised, imbued with a shadowy tint. Leaning closer, I imagined a fleeting flicker across my own irises, as if the ceiling's darkness echoed within me. The decision solidified. I would leave at dusk, take only what I could carry, and not look back. A cheap motel, my car, anything but here. Yet, as I gathered essentials, a peculiar resistance met me. The air near the exit seeming to thicken, to impede. I pushed through, stepping into the corridor, pausing for one final glance back through the open doorway. In the dim light filtering from the hall, I saw it, or imagined I saw it. A contorted suggestion within the ceiling's blackness. The hollow outline of a face, daring me to hold its gaze. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing unnaturally. My heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Even now, gripping the cool metal of the stairwell railing, fingers tight, I feel its persistence. That presence lingers behind the closed door, clinging to the walls that were mine, waiting. My hand moves to my sweat-damp face, and I catch my reflection in the banister's polished curve. For a sliver of a second, a shadow ripples behind my eyes. I blink, and it vanishes. But the knowing remains, cold and certain. It isn't finished. That darkness has tasted my fear, and I suspect it will not be contained by plaster and paint forever. It is patient. It is hungry. And I fear the next time I meet my own gaze, I may find I'm no longer looking alone. Even now, recalling the night The world fractured. My heart still performs a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Months I'd poured into the project, a solitary obsession, yet never anticipating intrusion from beyond the confines of my own skull. My device, I was certain, would merely chart the labyrinthine pathways of my own mind, preserving the ephemeral currents of thought for later dissection. So, when the jagged, unfamiliar peaks first erupted across the monitor, I dismissed them as phantoms in the machine. My fingers traced the sensor leads, checked the junctions, scanned for the telltale signs of flawed circuitry. All secure. A cold knot tightened low in my gut. My hands found the table's edge, knuckles white. Leaning closer, my gaze locked onto the screen's phosphorescent glow. Those flickers weren't chaos. They possessed cadence, a disturbing rhythm. Prudence screamed to sever the connection, retreat into sleep, but a deeper, more insistent whisper urged me onward, demanded I unmask the source. By training, I am Elias Thorne, a cartographer of the sleeping brain. My province is the delicate machinery mapping neural tides. Years spent wrestling with EEG schematics, circuit boards, lines of code. I fancied myself adept in this realm. Yet that night, confronting the anomaly, I felt utterly novice. The apparatus itself, an experimental circlet I'd christened the Somnus Weaver, was conceived to snare the gossamer shifts in brain activity across sleep's varied landscapes. My ambition, to isolate the very signature of dreams, perhaps even project their fleeting narratives onto a screen, or at least map their contours with unprecedented fidelity. Notebooks overflowed with arcane diagrams, equations scribbled in manic haste. Preliminary trials on volunteers yielded nothing extraordinary. Thus, I resolved to become my own subject, here in the quiet solitude of my home, under the cloak of deepest night. My apartment, a cramped repository smelling perpetually of aging paper and the ghost of stale coffee, doubles as my laboratory. The living room hosts my workspace. A folding table strewn with printed circuit boards, a secondary laptop humming quietly, a Medusa tangle of cables. The Somnus Weaver rested on a rubber mat, poised. Calibration completed earlier that evening, the protocol felt straightforward. Recline upon the small sofa, affix the device, initiate recording, and surrender to slumber. A thrill coursed through me at the prospect of fresh data come morning. Yet, it mingled with a tremor of anxiety. Sleeping embraced by this intricate contraption seemed inherently unnatural. Methodically, I began. Each contact sensor, slicked with conductive gel, found its designated perch upon my scalp. Temporal, frontal, occipital lobes, guided by reference charts, the headband settled, snug but not constricting. Cables clicked into the small control box, relaying signals to the laptop. My breath felt thin, shallow, as I eased onto the sofa cushions. A final keystroke launched the recording sequence. I extinguished the overhead light, plunging the room into near darkness, save for the monitor's cool radiance. Then, I courted oblivion. My mind, usually a frantic carousel at bedtime, succumbed swiftly that night, dragged under by the undertow of exhaustion from endless tinkering. Sometime later, consciousness surfaced dimly. Eyelids fluttered open to find the laptop screen radiating an unusual intensity. Pushing myself upright, I rubbed sleep from my face. A faint, electric prickling danced along my scalp. The data stream flickered violently across the monitor. My pulse hammered, a sudden heat flushing my cheeks. The logs weren't merely capturing the expected patterns of REM sleep. Something alien resided within them, a waveform punctuated by periodic surges, utterly misaligned with the familiar stages of nocturnal neural activity. I swung my legs off the sofa, stood before the desk. My breathing hitched. My hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the keyboard. Had I inadvertently left the system vulnerable to external interference? Stray radio frequencies, electromagnetic pulses from neighboring devices. The Somnus Weaver was designed with shielding, meticulously layered, yet perhaps a flaw persisted. I scoured the code, interrogated the filters, re-examined every hardware link. No explanation emerged. Around 3 in the morning, surrender felt impossible. Sleep was a distant shore. Wired, restless, I settled back onto the sofa, allowing the Weaver to continue its vigil over my brainwaves for another hour. This time, as drowsiness crept in, a subtle throbbing commenced behind my eyes. A dream bloomed, vivid and strange, or perhaps not a dream at all. I stood within a cavernous, empty warehouse, bathed in the sterile glare of harsh white lights suspended high above. A low, resonant hum, like distant machinery, filled the space. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then, a peculiar crackling sound followed by a whisper, unintelligible, elusive. I strained to comprehend, but the effort shattered the illusion. I awoke with a choked gasp. Bolting upright, I tore the headset free. My forehead was slick with sweat. My t-shirt clung damply to my back. My hands felt icy, my mouth arid. I glanced at the screen. The anomalous spikes reappeared, bolder now, perfectly synchronized with the moments in the warehouse vision. The crackle, the whisper. I replayed the device's audio feed, mostly a wash of white noise, punctuated by random bursts of faint static. Leaning close, straining my ears, I could discern no words. A jolt of exhilaration warred with a sharp stab of fear. It seemed undeniable. I was receiving something, an unknown transmission intertwining itself with the fabric of my sleep. Morning found me stiff-necked on the sofa, the laptop still aglow. The logs presented a chaotic tapestry of data. My mind felt thick, fogged, yet the night's events remained starkly clear. 4 hours sleep, perhaps. I brewed potent black coffee, gulped it down, and resolved to dissect the data with renewed rigor. A quickly written script allowed me to isolate the aberrant signals from the baseline noise of my own neural activity. Once segregated, their structure revealed itself. Short, sharp bursts. A silence. Another burst. The intensity varied but not randomly. A repeating cycle emerged, insistent, like knuckles rapping on a door. My heart hammered anew as I stared, transfixed at the screen. Verification became paramount. I subjected the Weaver's sensors to standard function generator tests. They performed flawlessly. I attempted to induce a similar anomaly using random radio frequencies. The resulting patterns bore no resemblance to the captured signals. Nothing mundane accounted for these intrusions. The chilling thought dawned. Perhaps these signals originated somewhere beyond the reach of conventional equipment, beyond local interference. By late afternoon, hunger gnawed, clouding my thoughts. I ordered takeout, pacing the confines of the living room. my gaze repeatedly drawn to the sofa, the epicenter of the phenomenon. Temptation warred with apprehension. What might prolonged exposure to this unknown pattern inflict upon my mind? Yet, the lure of the mystery proved irresistible. I could not simply walk away. That night, I resolved upon another trial, this time bolstering my vigilance. A small camera was positioned to observe me, its feed displayed in real time on the laptop alongside the waveforms, should I wake. A voice recorder sat beside the laptop speaker, poised to capture any audible clues. Around 11, I strapped the Somnus Weaver back on. For a while, I remained awake, perched on the sofa's edge, scrutinizing the waveforms. For the first hour, only the familiar signatures appeared. Alpha, beta, hints of theta as fatigue deepened. Then, near midnight, the undertow pulled me down. I recall my eyelids growing heavy, my body surrendering its tension, my thoughts dissolving into mist. The next instant, I stood again within the warehouse, concrete cool beneath my feet. The air hung thick with the musty scent of aged metal. Overhead, the lights buzzed, their drone accompanied by that pervasive, steady hum. A familiar tightness gripped my chest. Then came the crackle, sharper this time, seemingly closer. I remained frozen, grappling with the reality of the experience. Dream or intrusion, my hand instinctively touched the side of my head. The weaver was still in place. A profound chill traced my spine. Abruptly, a thin, high-pitched beep pierced the air, immediately followed by a whisper, brushing against my ear. I tried to form words, but my voice seemed trapped, useless. Tentatively, I took a step forward. My footfall echoed unnervingly in the vast emptiness. A faint voice murmured something akin to, hello. The sound distorted, uncertain. Then, a surge of pressure bloomed in my temples, making me flinch. I jerked my head sharply to the left. Utter darkness swallowed everything. I woke on the sofa, gasping for breath. My entire back was drenched in sweat. A bitter, metallic taste coated my tongue. My heart pounded with such force I felt the pulse drumming in my ears. My eyes flew to the laptop. The data stream raged, displaying the same repeating spikes, their amplitude significantly increased. The camera blinked, still recording. With a trembling hand, I reached out and halted the capture. Checking the timestamp confirmed the signals had persisted for roughly 2 minutes, coinciding precisely with the duration of my perceived time in the warehouse. Playing back the audio revealed rustling, likely my own movements, interspersed with a series of soft pops and clicks, and then, unmistakably, something that sounded like a disembodied voice, faint but present. A cold shiver traversed my arms. The ensuing days blurred into a cycle of obsessive testing and meticulous cross-checking. I refined the software, eliminating any conceivable pathway for local interference. Every cable received additional foil shielding. I systematically deactivated every other electronic device in the apartment, phone, router, everything, seeking any change. None occurred. Each night I donned the Somnus Weaver. The warehouse dream inevitably returned, its details subtly shifting. Dimmer lights, a louder hum, but the whispering presence remained constant. Sleep became a thing to dread. I attempted 2 nights without the device, retreating to my actual bed, hoping distance from the apparatus might grant reprieve. The dreams vanished, I awoke feeling marginally more rested, but the absence only sharpened the hook of curiosity. I couldn't ignore it. Something was reaching out, etching those spikes onto my neural record, mirroring my dreamscape. Was it alien? Some terrestrial phenomenon science hadn't yet catalogued. I oscillated violently between primal fear and an insatiable need for answers. On the fifth night of this ordeal, I committed to a bolder strategy. I augmented the recording setup. Multiple camera angles, a microphone positioned directly before my mouth to capture any sleep talking. I integrated real-time translation software, programmed to analyze any captured sounds, hoping to decipher the whispers if they constituted some fragmented language. By midnight, my nerves were frayed wires. My palms felt clammy, a persistent ache tightening the muscles in my neck. Forcing myself onto the sofa, I secured the Somnus Weaver and initiated the recording sequence. Sleep proved elusive. My mind raced. What if something was actively attempting contact? Was I, in my hubris, inviting it in? My pulse refused to settle. Eventually, sheer exhaustion claimed me. My eyelids drooped, heavy as lead weights, and I sank into the waiting darkness. Instantly, the warehouse materialized around me. The lights above flickered erratically. The omnipresent hum droned, but now I perceived a faint, shimmering luminescence playing upon the distant walls. My skin prickled. My throat felt constricted, swallowing impossible. Then the whisper returned clearer, more distinct than ever before, seeming to originate directly behind me. I spun around. Empty space greeted me, punctuated only by the flickering lights. I tried to speak within the dream, my voice emerging as a ragged tremor. "Can you hear me?" I pushed the words out, uncertain if they truly formed. The whisper responded with a flurry of crackles and sharp pops, then a sound coalesced, vaguely resembling a word. Help? Or something phonetically similar? My stomach churned. I instinctively backed away from the locus of the voice, my legs suddenly weak. The pressure in my temples intensified, bringing a wave of dizziness. My knees buckled. The cold concrete met my skin. Blackness engulfed me, and I surfaced once more on the sofa. My first conscious act was a sharp inhalation that caught in my throat, triggering a fit of coughing. I gripped the sofa's arms, anchoring myself. My gaze shot to the laptop. The signals had surged dramatically, spiking precisely when the voice manifested in the dream. The translator software displayed strings of bizarre phonetic clusters, matching no known language, yet it flagged certain segments as potential word fragments. My hand shook as I scrolled through them. None yielded coherent meaning in English, but their consistent, patterned presence screamed that this was no figment of my imagination. Over subsequent nights, the experiments continued. More signals were captured, the dream repeating with minor variations. Each episode left me suspended between horrified fascination and deepening dread. My body bore the accumulating toll. Tension headaches plagued my waking hours. A fine tremor sometimes danced in my hands. My shoulders remained perpetually knotted. I found myself pacing the apartment, unable to settle, unable to focus on mundane tasks. Washing dishes felt like an interruption. My thoughts invariably drifted back to the warehouse, the signals, the voice. After a week consumed by this cycle, I resolved to attempt communication. A controlled transmission back. I modified the Somnus Weaver, adding functionality to emit a subtle output signal designed to potentially piggyback on my own neural emissions during sleep. A profoundly risky endeavor, yet the imperative to act felt overwhelming. If this unknown source could reach me, perhaps I could reach it in return. I programmed a simple pattern, a rudimentary binary sequence, hoping the device could merge it with my sleep state brain waves. The mere contemplation sent my heart racing, slicked my forehead with sweat, dried my mouth. That night, settling onto the sofa with the modified Weaver felt momentous. The living room air seemed thick, stagnant. I cracked a window, inviting a sliver of cool night air. Then I pressed record. My pulse throbbed, a heavy drumbeat against the silence as I eased towards sleep. Initially, the dreamscape remained mundane. Fragmented images of my apartment, indistinct shapes swirling. Then, the shift occurred. I stood once more upon the cold floor of the warehouse. The hum resonated louder than ever before. The lights flickered violently, painfully bright. I sensed movement just beyond my peripheral vision. Whirling around, I glimpsed it, or thought I did. A tall, indistinct shape, flickering at the edge of perception. "Who are you?" I called out, the words tearing from my throat. The shape vanished, the familiar pressure clamped down on my temples. Vertigo washed over me, my legs turning to water. The whisper intensified, yet remained stubbornly unintelligible. I focused my will, concentrating fiercely on the binary pattern I'd programmed, willing it to merge with the outgoing signals. My heart hammered against my sternum, threatening to break free. The whisper's pitch seemed to modulate, almost as if in response. Staggering forward, I reached out, grasping only empty air. Suddenly, the lights began to strobe uncontrollably. The hum escalated in frequency until the very air seemed to vibrate. My teeth clenched involuntarily. A lance of sharp pain shot through my skull. I cried out. My vision dissolved into blackness. When my eyes snapped open on the sofa, I was gulping air like a drowning man. My hands shook uncontrollably. My chest felt brutally constricted. Scrambling upright, I lunged for the laptop. The data confirmed it. My binary sequence had transmitted, at least once. More astonishingly, the system log revealed a bizarre feedback loop. The incoming unknown signal had fluctuated, mirroring the timing of my outgoing pulses. Something had registered my attempt. I stared at the screen. A volatile cocktail of elation and terror churning within me. The translator software had captured more phonetic fragments, still cryptic, offering no clear message. Glancing at the clock, nearly 4:30 a.m., I felt utterly depleted, scoured clean by the experience. My neck and shoulders screamed with tension. The metallic taste lingered stubbornly in my mouth. I realized I was panting, shallow, rapid breaths, as if I'd run a desperate race. I sat there for long minutes, consciously slowing my breathing, letting the adrenaline ebb. My gaze swept across the familiar clutter of my apartment, half expecting spectral forms to emerge from the shadows. Nothing stirred. The Somnus Weaver lay beside me on the table, tethered to the humming laptop. The only sounds were my own ragged exhalations and the soft whir of the computer's fan. Wiping sweat from my brow, I forced myself through the calming ritual of saving all the data, meticulously logging the event, and finally powering down the system. What else was there to do? A sudden chill prompted me to rise and secure the window, the latch clicking loudly in the silence. My heart, though calmer, still beat with unnatural force. What intelligence, what force, is attempting to breach the barrier of my sleep? And why through the fragile vessel of dreams? The question haunts me. Should I continue this perilous dialogue? Or should I dismantle the somnus weaver, shatter the lens I inadvertently created, and retreat? But retreat feels impossible now. My mind is a cauldron of unanswered questions, one part yearning to push deeper, to decode the transmissions, the other screaming for dreamless sleep, for release from the warehouse's oppressive weight, the sickening pressure in my head. Regardless of the path chosen, the comforting illusion of normalcy has irrevocably shattered. I constructed a tool to listen to myself, and instead I flung open a door to something else. The tension coils in my stomach even now, as I sit here, night falling, staring at the sofa, wondering if I possess the courage, or the folly, to place that headset upon my brow once more. Thus far, the compulsion has always won. It loomed in a constricted alcove of the antique labyrinth, glimpsed the instant I stepped inside. A tall case clock, somber wood swallowing the light. Behind its glass panel, stark hands were arrested at the stroke of 12. An undeniable wrongness emanated from it, a silent discord. The proprietor materialized nearby, his gaze sharp, unsettlingly direct. "No mending that one," he pronounced, a gravelly finality in his tone. "Waste of effort." His caution went unheeded. The clock's brooding aesthetics had already ensnared me. Skepticism is my usual shield. Yet that evening, I departed with the timepiece cradled awkwardly in my arms. A formless anxiety clinging to me like the shop's dust. Arrival home was late, the digital clock blinking 9:10 p.m. into the quiet. I maneuvered the clock into the living room, propping its considerable weight against the wall near the sofa. Dimness already reigned, and the clock's face seemed a pallid eye observing me from the gloom. Weariness, I told myself, rubbing tired eyes, just the residue of a long day. My phone, nearly depleted, found its charger. A flick of switches brought more lamps to life, a futile attempt to dispel the encroaching sensation of not being solitary. The house offered only its mundane hums. The refrigerator's low thrum from the kitchen, the faint electrical buzz of the hallway ceiling fixture. Familiarity warred with unease, my attention pulled inexorably back to the clock. Minutes were spent in its scrutiny. Dust layered its surfaces, the wood scarred along its edges by time or mishandling. Yet the glass front remained clear, affording an unobstructed view of those two hands, petrified at midnight, utterly inert. A tentative nudge sent the pendulum into a brief, reluctant sway before it settled back into profound stillness. A distinct chill, unrelated to the ambient temperature, touched my skin. Hunger gnawed, demanding precedence. Resolving to dismiss the clock for now, I nuked leftover dinner and sank onto the sofa, seeking refuge before sleep. The clock stood sentinel to my right, a dark monolith I consciously tried to ignore. Around 10:30, the television's chatter ceased. The bedtime ritual commenced. Teeth brushed, a change into worn shorts and a t-shirt. Bed beckoned. A final glance at my phone confirmed the time. 10:46 p.m. Darkness swallowed the room as the lamp clicked off. Sleep claimed me swiftly. I surfaced into consciousness, pulled from the depths by the resonance of deep chimes. Slow, ponderous tolls, heavy as cathedral bells echoing across centuries. A dream, surely. The bedroom lay submerged in absolute black. My bedside clock displayed 12 I's to low AM, its red numerals glowing, blurred by the haze of sleep. Then the second chime struck, a vibration that seemed to pulse through the very walls. Heart suddenly frantic, I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The tolling continued, methodically counting 12. Each resonant blow tightened something in my chest, stealing my breath. By the final chime, I was starkly awake, slick with cold sweat. My trembling hand fumbled for the light switch, nearly upsetting the bedside lamp. Illumination flooded the room, revealing normalcy, yet the air itself felt altered, charged. The fine hairs on my arms prickled erect. Realization dawned with icy certainty. The chimes originated from the pendulum clock downstairs. The broken clock, the inert clock. A frantic drumming began against my ribs as I swung my legs from the bed and ventured into the hallway. A faint, inexplicable breeze caressed my bare skin, though every window was sealed tight against the night. The living room door stood slightly ajar. Pushing it wider, revealed a space dominated by shadows. Only the weak glow from the hallway lamp behind me offered any definition. There it stood, the clock's silhouette stark against the gloom near the sofa. Its face remained fixed at midnight. The pendulum hung motionless. Nothing stirred. Swallowing proved difficult, my throat constricted. The chill deepened. Each slow step onto the living room floor elicited a groan from the old wood beneath my feet. Another wave of cold air washed over me, colder this time. And then the shadows. They weren't behaving. They seemed to writhe, elongating from the corners, tendrils of darkness reaching. I blinked, attributing it to panic. But the distortions persisted. My gaze snapped to the clock, half expecting frantic ticking or a swinging pendulum, but it remained a study in absolute stillness. I checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. Still? Had it frozen? A tap illuminated the screen, confirming the time. Seconds refused to advance. The entire house felt suspended, pinned to this single, spectral minute. Even the refrigerator's hum seemed muffled, distant. I felt profoundly, terrifyingly alone in motion. Then came the awareness, sharp and undeniable. A presence, no other term suffices. The sensation of being observed, of sharing the space. My chest tightened further. Whirling, I swept the beam of my phone's flashlight across the furniture. Sofa, ordinary. Coffee table, holding only a stray magazine. Corner lamp, unlit, but near the window. A patch of darkness seemed unnaturally dense, absorbing the light, refusing definition. The phantom breeze intensified, brushing my arms like spectral fingers. My pulse thundered, a frantic rhythm in my ears. I stood rooted, skin tingling, mouth desert dry. That primal instinct screaming someone stood just behind me, though turning revealed only empty air. The flashlight beam held steady on the corner. Nothing but shadow. Moving closer felt impossible. My legs turned to lead. Instead, I forced myself toward the clock, driven by a desperate need for a rational explanation. A hidden battery, a concealed mechanism. My heart hammered against my ribs, yet I reached out, my fingers closing over the side panel. The wood felt smooth, unnervingly cold. Pulling the front panel open revealed the pendulum, still as stone. No gears turned, no battery compartment lurked within. Just the derelict entrails of a broken machine. But an odor accompanied the reveal, faint, yet distinct, like decaying paper in a damp cellar. It clung only to the clock. Shutting the panel, I retreated a step, rubbing the goose flesh erupting on my arms. My phone stubbornly displayed 12:01 a.m. From the shadowed corner, a quiet rustling sound. My breath hitched, soft, furtive, like fabric whispering against plaster. I pivoted, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom once more. It illuminated the corner, empty save for the heavy curtain draped over the window. The curtain stirred, swaying gently. Despite the sealed window, panic surged, a primal urge to flee back to the bedroom's perceived safety. Then, abruptly, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive cold dissipated, replaced by the room's normal temperature. The curtain hung limp. My phone screen flickered, the time jumping forward. 12:02 a.m. The tension snapped. The refrigerator resumed its familiar drone. Reality reasserted itself as if a switch had been thrown. I didn't linger. I bolted to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. Remaining awake until nearly 2, checking my phone obsessively, needing the reassurance of time's relentless march. Exhaustion finally dragged me under. Morning arrived with a dull headache and a crick in my neck. The 7:10 a.m. alarm jolted me awake, the night's events rushing back with unnerving clarity. Shaky, uncertain, I compelled myself to inspect the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, glinting off the sofa fabric and the clock's dusty bonnet. The clock remained, hands steadfastly pointing to midnight. Everything appeared placid, mundane. Perhaps I had succumbed to exhaustion and imagination. My phone showed the correct time, 7:05 a.m. Normalcy seemed restored. Coffee was brewed, emails scrolled through. Distractions sought, but my thoughts kept circling back. The chimes, the creeping shadows, the chilling certainty of being watched. Returning the clock felt logical, yet a stubborn curiosity, a need to understand, held me back. Abandoning it felt incomplete. A call to a local horologist yielded an appointment for the following week with a man named Elias Thorne. The intervening days followed their usual rhythm. Work, commute, evenings at home. Daylight hours remained uneventful. But each night, as midnight approached, the dread returned. And precisely at 12, the chimes sounded. 12 slow, resonant tolls echoing through the silent house. The cold breeze would manifest, the shadows deepen and stretch, and my phone screen would freeze. The temporal pause never lasted long, perhaps a minute or two, but the fear it induced was profound. Blazing lights offered no deterrent. Shrouding the clock in a heavy blanket muffled nothing. Even relocating it to a distant closet failed. The chime still found me, the shadows still gathered. The grim ritual persisted. The motionless pendulum, the impossible tolling. On the 5th night, a new resolve formed. As the first chime reverberated, I activated my phone's stopwatch. How long did this temporal anomaly truly last? My hand trembled, watching the timer remain stubbornly at zeros do zero. The second chime struck. No change. The world felt suspended, brittle. Nausea churned in my stomach. A muttered curse escaped my lips. Then, a faint scraping sound, seemingly from the hallway. The hairs on my nape prickled. The chimes tolled on, my gaze fixed on the closet door where the clock now resided. It was slightly ajar, a dark slit against the white paint. I knew I had shut it firmly. Teeth clenched, icy sweat tracing paths down my spine. I watched. With the 12th chime, the scraping ceased. Simultaneously, my phone's stopwatch clicked over. 001002. Time resumed its flow. I sank to my knees, gasping, heart pounding violently enough to ring in my ears. A wave of faintness washed over me. The urge to obliterate the clock, to smash it into unrecognizable fragments, was overwhelming, yet tempered by a deeper fear. The fear of unleashing whatever entity was tethered to it, so it remained untouched. The rest of the night passed in restless pacing and shallow sleep. Elias Thorne arrived a few days later, a pragmatic-looking man in his 50s carrying a small, worn toolbox. Anxiety coiled in my gut as I led him to the closet and retrieved the clock, the wood cold beneath my reluctant grip. He gave it a cursory examination, then opened the front panel, peering intently at the mechanism within. He probed the rusted entrails, his brow furrowed. After a moment, he shook his head. "Mechanism's gutted," Thorne declared, his voice clipped. "Looks like brute force was used on it. Crude work. Not much left to salvage, frankly." He pointed out missing components, rusted gears. "Could it chime?" I asked, voice tight. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "In this state? Impossible. The chime rods are there, sure, but the striking train is completely broken. Couldn't make a sound if its life depended on it." I paid him for his time. His professional dismissal offering no comfort, only solidifying the dread. The clock could not chime, yet it did. That evening, resolve hardened into a plan. Around 11:30, I positioned my phone on a tripod in the living room. Lens aimed squarely at the clock, now returned to its spot near the sofa. The overhead light was extinguished, leaving only a single small lamp casting long shadows, ensuring the clock remained visible. I pressed record, then retreated to the hallway, positioning myself to observe from around the corner. The wait began, each tick of a normal clock elsewhere in the house amplifying the tension. 11:59 p.m., the lamp flickered erratically. The first chime sounded deep and resonant. The familiar cold washed through the house. My phone, held tight in my hand, displayed 11:59, the digits frozen. I counted the chimes aloud, my voice a trembling whisper, my body rigid. The air grew thick, heavy. By the 12th toll, sweat beaded on my forehead. The faint, musty odor of old decay filled my nostrils. The urge to scream, to run, warred with the need to witness. Then, the snap back to normalcy. My phone jumped to 12:01 a.m. Heart hammering, I hurried into the living room and stopped the recording. Trembling fingers navigated the playback. The video ran smoothly until precisely 11:59. Then the image froze. A static frame of the clock held for what felt like half a minute. Abruptly, the footage leaped forward to 12:01. No sound of chimes, only silence during the freeze. The camera had captured the temporal stutter, the glitch in reality, but not the impossible sound or the atmosphere of dread. Proof remained elusive, the phenomenon apparently mine alone. Trapped, that was the inescapable conclusion. Each midnight the 12 chimes would sound, the spectral cold would descend, shadows would writhe, and time itself would pause. Something unseen shared my home during those stolen moments. Smashing the clock felt too risky, potentially unleashing something worse. Keeping it meant enduring this nightly visitation, this silent, encroaching threat. Ultimately, the clock found a new home in the garage, shoved behind stacks of neglected boxes in a far corner. That first night, its relocation proved futile. The chimes still echoed through the house at midnight. The unnatural chill still swept through the rooms, raising gooseflesh. Huddled on my bed, fists clenched, impotent rage warred with stark terror. After the 12th chime, time lurched forward. I didn't investigate. I knew the clock remained untouched, hands locked at 12, a silent, mocking sentinel. Now every night unfolds with grim predictability. The chimes ring out, and for a brief, terrifying interval, the world outside holds its breath. My phone becomes inert, communication impossible. The presence makes itself known. A feeling, a shift in the darkness, always peripheral, always lurking just beyond sight, perhaps in the hallway, perhaps near the living room threshold. I lock my bedroom door, hold my breath, and count the tolls, waiting for the 12th. The dread has become a familiar companion, yet it never fails to constrict my chest. Part of me screams to burn it, to cast it onto the curb for some other unfortunate soul to find. But a stronger, colder fear prevails. The fear that severing the physical connection won't sever the bond, that the entity will remain. Will this cycle persist indefinitely, forever tethered to a repeating midnight? I am caught in this temporal loop, this nightly haunting. Thus far, no physical harm has occurred, but the erosion of peace, the constant thrum of fear, is taking its toll. My hands tremble more readily. Deep sleep is a forgotten luxury. I record this account, a message in a bottle tossed into an indifferent sea, because someone must know. The old pendulum clock remains frozen at midnight, yet every night it chimes and I wait, bracing myself, wondering when, or if, the shadows will finally yield their secrets, or if they will simply continue their silent, nightly encroachment.